occult groups that were during the time of King James, and the various kings and queens of England were practicing these particular sciences, and was labeled witchcraft. And by the way, when you see a witch on a broom, the way she rides her broom is backwards. The back part of the broom, where you sweep the floor, was always in the front, you see, and the pole was between her legs. Sexual symbolism, you see, sexual symbolism. And the ancient Americans always portrayed a witch that way. So it was very interesting. So go see this movie, Wicker Man. Wicker Man is a very, very heavy movie. What's interesting about the Wicker Man, besides all of the fertility rites, in the Wicker Man, this police officer is investigating a missing child. And what happens is, he is actually a ritual sacrifice. And they ritually sacrifice him at the end of the movie, burn him to death inside a giant wicker man, a wooden man. Now that's very interesting, because this particular ritual goes on every year right here in America. And it's called the Burning Man Festival, where they go to the Nevada desert, set up this gigantic man, and burn it every summer. And they have rituals go on all around this particular Burning Man Festival, you see. Now, what's also interesting about it is the year they started, that they began to publish it in the news that they were doing this. Now, and mind you, these are doctors, lawyers. These are people you see here in New York City going to work every day, suits and ties on. You see, because suit and ties are Masonic uniform. Masonic uniform. All of it coming out of Egypt and earlier. But what's interesting, the first year they publicized that they were doing this was the year that Betty Shabazz had burned to death that summer. Ritual sacrifice. She was burned to death. Had niggas standing on line to give blood. And of course, we know the white boy uses that blood, you see, uses that blood. Standing on line to give their blood. Now, there's some information that says Betty Shabazz was part of the Boule. She may have been in the Boule, but she wasn't down with their program, you see. Otherwise, they would not have burned her to death in this particular ritual. She was given up as a sacrifice, you see, as a sacrifice to this Burning Man science. Burned her to death, you see. Burned her to death. So, they use these particular rituals on us continually. And not only Betty Shabazz, but even just recently, Khalid Muhammad, who was murdered. 2 years before Khalid Muhammad was killed, they had the whole Diallo thing. In February 4th, they shot him 41 times. That 41 is dealing with the 14th, which is St. Valentine's Day Massacre. St. Valentine's Day Massacre. A year later, they had the trial to let the cops go. All the ritual going on. And then this year, the ritual was to kill Khalid Muhammad. And they kept quiet about it, basically, because silence is a form of speech. Silence is a form of speech. This was a major ritual that went on. And the Diallo just led up to this. Part of the ritual was the whole Puff Daddy thing with Johnny Cochran in court as a diversion, as an energy grabber, while they do this particular shit on Khalid, you see, while they take Khalid out. I mean, there's a movie called The Jackal, where they could put powder on your car door, and you touch your car door. A person touched the car door in the movie and had an aneurysm, you see. And I'm coming out with a couple of books, rare books, that's teaching you how to concentrate your energy. how to concentrate your energy. So they gave you the whole Puff Daddy thing, who can't sing, do nothing. I mean, the music is complete garbage, you see, as a diversion. Although, esoterically speaking, Puff Daddy was on trial for Biggie and Tupac, you see. Biggie and Tupac, esoterically speaking. But while all this is going on, you got Clinton moving to Harlem. In the newspaper, the same day that it was announced that Khalid Muhammad was in the hospital with an aneurysm dying, Clinton came out it was in the Daily News. Homeboy comes to Harlem. Homeboy comes to Harlem. Clinton. And that. Very, very interesting. So a lot of these rituals are perpetuated upon us, a lot of mind control that we need to start to deal with. Open our eyes to these things and begin to teach, at least on a certain level, you see. At least start to begin to do our own rituals, tapping into our own energy. One of them, Count Saint Germain. There's a movie called The Satanic Rites of Dracula. Now, Christopher Lee is a major occultist. His family is one of the oldest bloodlines in England, which means he was taught by the Moors. He was taught by the Moors. And he always plays the part of a vampire. He plays the most, he's in the most movies in history, Christopher Lee. He always plays the part of a major vampire, and throughout the ages always die and come back ages later, you see. You see, the vampire is over 500 years or maybe 1,000 years old, you see, in all his movies, always coming back from the dead. That is dealing with the elixir of life. Because he was taught by the Moors, his family is the oldest bloodline, and he's playing the part of this Count Saint Germain in these particular movies. Christopher Lee, you need to check out his movie. He has a movie called The Devil Rides Out. It's one of the most awesome movies I've ever seen in my life, you see. Dealing with using various articles, using the circle, using the minstrel, and all the sciences are in this particular movie. There's a scene where he pours some blood into this, this hot tin, and the smoke from the blood comes up, and he uses the blood to conjure the spirit of the person's blood he had taken, you see. The blood that he had taken. And in the movie, they don't show you where he got the blood from. But he was able to conjure up the spirit of that person's blood, and he was able to control it through using the blood. Which brings me back to Khalid Muhammad. Wherein before Khalid Muhammad passed on, moved to the next dimension, you got to understand what this means. You got to understand what this means. You see. And I don't know if the family understands or knows that if I had the power or control to bury the brother, I would not bury him in America. I'd take him out of America into a sacred African burial ground. Because supposedly they buried him near Malcolm, and I seriously doubt if Malcolm's in the grave, you see. You got to understand these people. You got to understand them. They do these particular rituals. They use everything, every article they possibly can, because you got to understand the greatest, you learn the science of various rituals that have taken place throughout the various time periods on the earth. And you take that information and design your own rituals from that information, you see. That is one reason for learning this stuff, because now, once you get to a certain level, you create your own reality from the basic plan, you see. You create your own energy. So, there's a science of conjuring other people's energy, but the first thing you want to do is learn to conjure your own energy, you see, which you have left here various periods of times on the earth, you see. But as I said before, you know, you don't want them getting a hold of your body and or your blood. You got to understand that. So another way of conjuring energy through rituals is through, I mean, Aleister Crowley used his writings as rituals, you see. So you could sit down and write yourself up a poem using certain words as a ritual, you see, as a ritual, writing poetry. Francis Bacon, who was also Shakespeare, took on the name Shakespeare, used the sonnets as a cipher and rituals. The Moors, as the Inquisition began to kill them off, the Templars, the Rosicrucians, who was the secret society, who was much earlier based on the esoteric teachings coming out of Egypt. They would write each other, they set up all the colleges. And the way they communicated to each other was through ciphers and sonnets to the colleges, from one college to the other, you see. This is the way they communicated with each other. And so even the languages, certain languages were devised. For instance, Latin was created by Tertullian, who was from Carthage, Africa, you see? Latin, where we get Spanish, which is the language of law. The Garamantes walked from North Africa into Europe and created this place called Germany. Germany comes from Garamanti, which English is a lower form of the German language, you see, created all these things. So, but Francis Bacon wrote all these particular plays as rituals and ciphers. And that's why when you go to college, he was one of the most prominent people. You had to read some of his writings. You had to read his writings and study these people. These are major occultists that you have to study, and you don't know what they're talking about, you see. You're going by a fake history you were given, you see. William Shakespeare and all that kind of stuff. There's a play he wrote that was dealing with the, besides Romeo and Juliet, dealing with Gemini, he had another play dealing with Cancer, or the Scarab, which was a Midsummer Night's play, I think it is. Midsummer's Night, which was dealing with the sign of Cancer, which is in the middle of the summer, June, you see. Shakespeare, you got to understand that. So many of the things they had to do, they had to code a lot of these things, and even the ones who were adopted into the European society, as they got older and as they begin to recultivate a lot of the knowledge that was stolen from them, the white boy would come to them, they would have the books, and they would have to go to these Moors to say, well, which is right? What's right? How do I use this information? You see. And the Moors that taught them began to become prominent within those societies. And it was a Masonic code, though. It was a Masonic code. As you become prominent in these particular societies, you begin to, they have to paint you white, you see. It was a Masonic code to be painted white. And so when you see a lot of these pictures of kings and queens and mulattoes, from which the Knights of Malta were really the Knights of Mulatto, you see. Malta was mulatto, you see. Had to be coded because of the Inquisition, the church. The church, you see. And so these people were painted white. When you see Alexander Pushkin, who has a statue in the White House, on the White House lawn, you see. Just unveiled last year. So you got to understand that. So, but even in America, Ben Franklin and the so-called early settlers got the whole science of government from the Iroquois. You see, the Iroquois, who were called Indians, which means blue-black, comes from the word indigo, which comes out of Egypt, which was dealing with Osset, who was Isis, because the indigo was dealing with a philosopher's stone called a lapis, a blue-black stone, indigo. It was called a lapis stone, which was a symbolism of Isis, because Horus, who was representative of the first eye or the third eye, sat in the lap of Isis, who was the blue-black god of Egypt. Her lap became known as lapis, you see, lapis, from which you get the blue-black lapis stone, you see. And so, indigo became known as blue-black because it was an indigo stone, blue-black stone, from which we get the word Indian, which I had a whole list that I was selling for quite some time of all, actually I was giving it away, of all the black people in America, of all the various names, Brown, John, Terry, James, all these different names were names of surnames of indigenous people in America, so-called Indians. And all the names that we were told that were given to us from slave masters are not slave master names at all. Those are names that the slave masters had taken on for themselves, you see. Taken on for themselves. All surnames of indigenous people, you see. Iroquois, Seminoles, you see. And so it was over 1,000 names. And so the whole, Ben Franklin helped to adopt the whole Iroquois Constitution, which was called was a confederacy actually, and it was called the Great Law of Peace, which embodied the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, you see, and even the setting up of the various branches of government, the 3 branches, judicial, and the executive, and even the Congress. As a matter of fact, the judicial branch was called the Women's Council by the Iroquois. The Women's Council. And the executive branch was called the Firekeeper. It's called the Firekeepers. And of course, Congress or the Senate was called had 2 groups, was the elders and the youngers, you see. But the judicial was the actual, the Women's Council, you see, the judges, you see. All adapted later by this American government, so-called American government, you see. And so